Welcome to Litigation Help. My name is Heather Hurlitwin. In this video, we're going to talk about the law on how property is divided in Ontario, Canada. My special guest today is Shmuel Stern of Disclosure Clinic. Welcome back, Shmuel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So, Shmuel, how do couples divide their property after they separate? And I have a second part to my question. Is there a difference between married and common law couples?
So this is a very common question. Obviously, people get together either through a marriage or they're just living together and then they separate and they don't know what's next.
Right.
How do you divide? I think most people have the conception that we just gather up everything into pile everything into one room in a sense and divide everything 50-50.
Yes, exactly.
And that is not the answer for either married people or not married people. And it's actually kind of confusing. So I took a moment to create a complete hypothetical situation, not related to family law, that I hope will get to the underlying tension that people feel when they separate with, and one party invariably wants the division to happen and one party does not want the division to happen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and if you have any questions, obviously ask along the way.
Sounds good.
Okay, so many people think that either that there's only one way to divide property, or that there are two ways to divide property. There's the not married property division method, and then there's the married property division method. And you may not even know what they are, but you know that something like that exists. And the truth of the matter is, this is where it gets really complicated, even for lawyers, is that the not married property is always existing in Ontario law, whether you're a brother and a sister, or a neighbor and another neighbor, or an employee and employer. There is standard law that applies to everybody. And then on top of that law, we have the married property division. And it's important.
Interesting.
And I kind of overspoke when I started talking about employer and employee, because the not married property law is what we call equitable law. Okay.
Right.
And equitable is a fancy word for fair.
Fair.
Okay. Right. And so basically, two people commingle their money some way or another, and then they want to separate it, and somebody says it's not fair. That's why it's called equitable law. It's just not fair. So that's why I'm saying it applies to everybody. And then on top of that, there's legislated law. And that is where the government decided that for this particular relationship, we are going to put some kind of structure to figure out how to divide the property. And so that's why I said with the employer and employee, there's that has its own legislative law, with employment law. Fine.
Right.
What I want you to take away from the slide, though, is that the married property division doesn't fit 100% over the not married property division, which means that the equitable law, that concept of fairness, can still be argued within a married property division.
Oh, wow.
And that makes it super confusing. Okay, fine. So I was trying to figure out a good analogy for both of these things, and what's the difference? What's the real end of the day difference that a person who has no experience with law wants to understand? What are you doing? Why am I filling out all these pieces of paper?
Yeah.
So I hope this will be helpful. Imagine there are two kids, let's call it Jack and Jill. There's Jack. He has a lemonade stand on one side of the street, and it's a pretty cheap lemonade stand that he built out of cardboard, and it's worth $10.
Right.
Jill put a little bit more effort, and she has a cool plastic stand that's worth $50. and they stare at each other all day because they're competitors, right? And they start to talk, and they realize that, you know, Jill's good at making the lemonade, Jack's good at counting money. We'll soon find out how good he is, actually.
Right.
And for whatever reason, they decide that they're gonna actually join forces and make one lemonade stand.
Mm.
And not only that, and here you see next to them, they have their cans of their cans where they collect their sales.
Right.
So not only are they going to put together their own one stand,
Right.
but Jack says, you know what, I have that flimsy stand, I'm gonna sell it. I'll just sell it to somebody, and I'm gonna give you my $10 of stand, and we can make one big stand, and it's gonna be Jill's stand. Okay, so now Jill has a stand that's worth $60 because Jack has contributed the value of his sale proceeds from his stand into Jill, and now they are going to proceed with their business.
Right.
So now those cans that were sitting on the stands.
Yes.
Let's just talk about that. Jack had nothing in his can.
Okay. Yeah.
And Jill, she was doing okay already, and she had $20 sitting in her can. And Jack and Jill said, you know what? Let's put a third jar or a third can on our stand together. We're going to call it our tip jar, and we're going to split it 50-50. Any tips? Great.
Okay.
Fine. And so they continue.
Okay.
Now, as life happens, their sales weren't doing too hot at all. In fact, it was a cool day, and they had no sales at all. But along comes Pete. Now, Pete is Jack's good friend, and he's feeling bad for Jack. And he says, I don't want any lemonade. I just want to give you a present. Okay. And he says, here's $10. And so now Jack has $10 in his can, courtesy Pete. And then then Jack says, you know what? Now that I'm flush with all this cash, I'm going to spend it on a holiday on an island. And now he only has $5. Okay. And I guess what I should have said at the beginning is, don't get too caught up on the numbers. This is like the old bus driver riddle where, you know, people get on, people get off. Don't get too caught up on the numbers. I'll summarize everything. The point, though, is that things happen, and yet there are no sales going on in this particular lemonade venture. And so Jack says to Jill, you know, I feel really bad for myself. Yeah, and you still have your $20. Can you give me some money? And so Jill says, you know, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put $5 of my money into the tip jar, and that'll bring me down to $15. And then I'm going to give you $5, and that'll bring you up to 10. Okay, and now we're kind of even equal here. It looks like, right? In our tip jar. Great. Okay, and as life happens, not only was it a bad lemonade day, but it was just a bad lemonade business, and they part ways. Okay, so where are we right at this moment with Jack and Jill? So follow along, because this is where the rubber hits the road, as they say. Jack had started with his $10 stand and nothing in his can. He sold the stand and he put $10 into Jill's stand. So now he's got nothing, literally. Right. Then he was gifted $10 by Pete and he spent it. So he's now up $5. Then he was given $5 by Jill. Right. And then he has 50% in the $5 tip jar. So that's $2.50. And so Jack's grand total as of this moment is $12.50. Okay. Not bad, considering he started at $10. Right? Now, you can analyze what that means, but here he is, $12.50. So let's look at Jill. Jill started with her expensive stand and her can, and so she had $70. Then Jack gave her $10, right? He sold his stand and gave her the money. So now she's up 80.
Right.
Then she gave $5 to the tip jar. So she's down $5 in her can. We'll get to the tip jar in a minute. And then she further gave that $5 to Jack. So now she's down to $70. But remember, there is $2.50 in the tip jar. So she has $72.50.
Right.
So she is now at $72.50, which, if you do the math, is she also gained some money here, $2.50.
Right.
Okay, where did that money come from? Where's that extra money? And really, it's Pete in this scenario.
Right.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine.
Okay. Yeah.
So now let's talk about not married versus married. What do we? Jack's looking at Jill and saying, "Wait a second, you have all this money. I don't have any money. I want money."
Right.
Right? Okay, that's usually how this works.
Yes.
So now I'm going to have to explain to you what would happen if Jack and Jill were not married.
We're never
in that
married.
scenario.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So this is how it works in Ontario, and this is the law of equity. And if you think this is complicated, good, because it is. And it's very, very fact specific. We have this law called unjust enrichment, and it says we're going to do a 3-part test. The first question is one party enriched? Did somebody get money from somebody else or value of money? And the second part of the test is, did the other party get correspondingly deprived? Okay, so let's just stop there for 1 second. And we can apply this very simply to the lemonade stand, right?
Yeah.
So Jill is enriched by $10, right? And Jack is down his $10, right at that one step there, right? And the third part of the test is there's no legal reason for the above transaction to have occurred. So that is to say, there are legal reasons why people get enriched and people get deprived. Can you think of reasons why money
Like by
changes
contract?
hands?
You mean like sort of if there's a contract that something like that? Yeah.
Sure, exactly. So let's just see them. There are 3 of them. Before you even get the contract, what if it was Jill's birthday and Jack gave her a $10 gift? Here's a gift card.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Can Jack now ask for the money back? And
No.
the answer is no. Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't ask for birthday presents back. Otherwise, it's not much of a present.
Right.
You know where this comes up, just as an aside, is engagement rings, when the engagement is broken off, right?
Yes.
And people say, well, it was a gift, but it was a conditional gift, right?
Yeah.
But think about that. That too is an enrichment. Somebody has the ring, somebody has lost the value of the ring.
Right.
And so the person says, yeah, but you gave it to me as a gift. And they say, well, it was a conditional gift.
Right. Upon marriage,
Right. And which never happened.
Yeah, which never, right.
Okay. So what's another reason why people get enriched and deprived? Consideration. Consideration is the legal fancy way of saying, you do for me, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So if Jill was giving, Jill came in with $20, she was doing pretty good starting this whole scenario, right?
Yeah.
And what if Jack said, hey, can you give me a lesson on how to sell? I'm consulting with you on lemonade business. And she gives a lesson and he gives her $10. Well, that's consideration. That's
right.
I gave you a service and you're paying me for the service, and you can't ask for the money back.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. It's like that there was a deal. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. But it's not even a deal, because we're getting to deal right now, which is contract.
Okay.
Right? It's consideration is deal without the paperwork.
Okay.
Right? So then you can get into the paperwork, which is contract or debt, or debt contract, which is to say, you lent me the money is a good example, right? So let's say Jill says, yeah, I have your $10, but you told me I can have this $10 for 20 years, no interest payable. So now that you're asking for it back, you're a little bit early. and I'm not giving that money back.
Right.
That's contract. Okay. In family law, we have a problem. We have a huge problem. This law of unjust enrichment is very, very old law. It predates Canada's existence. And it's very easy for me and you to say, look at that lemonade stand transaction, $10. Let's pull that money and give it back, for example, right? But what do you do if there's a long relationship and somebody buys the pizza in May 2015 and the other person pays for the car insurance from 2016? You gotta like we're talking over a span of years. There's the give and take of
Right.
And how do you figure out enrichment and deprivation? And then number three, like, how do you figure this all out? And the answer is it's a mess. That's the answer. It's a mess. We are imposing very old law on very it's not even so new, but like just on relationships that are not necessarily proactively thinking about this. Okay. And we have to be very careful about this because again, we're talking about fairness, right? That's the whole point of the law, is fairness. And so in 2012, 2013, the Supreme Court of Canada said, we're going to come up with a concept called joint family venture. And what we're trying to do is kind of impose on top of this unjust enrichment analysis that it's possible that over time, not on a single transaction, but over time, if there's an intention that one party is going to take on a certain role in the marriage and the other person is going to take on a different role that's going to accumulate wealth, that we're going to say that there was an enrichment and deprivation and no legal reason, and we're going to share that wealth. Okay. And the point of this session is not to talk about joint family venture, just to say that it exists. And so now let's go back.
Right.
Let's go back to the unjust enrichment and just play it out. Jack's going to say, I want my $10 back, right? And Jill's going to say, well, that's very nice that you want my $10 back, but I want my $5 back.
Right.
Not only that, I want the $250 back that I put in the joint tin.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this happens with a house. Just think about a house in life. Somebody moves into somebody else's house, and they start contributing toward it, toward the other person's house, and then they separate. I like to think of it as I call it the ceiling fan principle. So somebody moves into somebody's house and buys a ceiling fan from Canadian Tire, and they separate, and the person who bought the ceiling fan, who's not on title of the house, says, wait a second, it's not fair. You're keeping that ceiling fan. I paid for that. Okay. The argument gets worse than that, because the ceiling fan party, and again, this is just about parties. It doesn't, you don't have to be in a romantic relationship. This could be applied to anybody. That party who bought the ceiling fan could say, not only should I get my $135 back for the ceiling fan, the house went up in value because of it.
Oh my, yes.
I want to cut in the increase. Okay.
I can see that.
So putting that argument aside, what are we left with if they actually are, if the money goes back according to these arrows? And the answer is exactly where they started from. Jill gets her money back, but pays back Jack his $10. So she's left with $70. And Jack started at 10, but he was gifted 5 from a third party. So he's actually 10 and he spent it, right? So he's got 15. And is that necessarily what the law is expecting, to put people back in the place where they are supposed to be? The answer is yes, with the caveat that this is a very simple example, and there is the issue of growth. How do we share the growth of an asset where it's contributed to by another person, which we just talked about with the ceiling fan.
Right.
Okay, but that's equity, is fairness, put people back where they were when they started.
Right.
Okay, so if you thought that was confusing, let's talk about marriage.